Hello, everybody. I'm Melina Sedó. I'm the creator of Serenissima Obscura for Vortex Verlag, and I'm here together with Mark Smylie, who has been doing a lot of work for us. Not only illustrations, but also battle maps and stunning maps. And I would like to show you just a couple of examples of his work. I'm going to hope that it's working out here. So you should see my screen in a couple of seconds. Okay, yeah, here. So I would like to just show you a couple of the illustrations that Mark has done for our project. This is a scene for Serenissima Obscura. That's
right. So starting with the very grisly scene there too, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a horror or mystery role-playing game, so we want to show this side of the game. Exactly. And then we've got another. This is the cover page of one of the main chapters, Cloak and Dagger Investigation in an evening scene in Venice. I like this also really, really a lot. I love the colors of that. And then I would like to show here also one of the most stunning illustrations with a lot of detail. You can see the Doge's Palace. You can see the Molo in front of the Doge's Palace with the galley there. So what I love really about Mark's work, that he puts in so much detail work and so much research in this work. So I'm really always stunned by what he's doing there. And I already know how much of research goes into these illustrations. I just want to show one or two of the battle maps that are going to be in our project. This is, for example, one of the battle maps. As you can see, this will be a scene that plays on sea. There are a couple of smaller boats and a bigger galley. This is actually the Bucintoro, which is the state's barge of the Doge, and there might be a fight going on there. So looking forward to that. But we also have a couple of other maps that are, for example, underwater, or another one. So I'm not going to spill all the beans because what we want to talk about today are the streets maps that Mark created for us. This is one of the street maps, and I'm going to stop my screen sharing because I would like to ask Mark about how about his process, how he created these maps for us, because there's got a lot of research and stuff in it, and I want to give over to Mark.
Thanks. Well, actually, so you actually directed me to a couple of things. In fact, it occurs to me that the first thing to maybe share is a website that you had found, which gave us a really, really great map of 15th century Venice, which was based on the map by, I think, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, it's Jacopo de Barberi.
Barberi, yes.
Barberi, right? So that map, if I can share that. Yeah, hopefully what you see is this fabulous website, which someone had created, which has a wonderful picture drawn in the early 1500s that gave us a really, really detailed look at what Venice allegedly looked like then. Actually, sorry, I turned on so it has a whole series of like really interesting layers, in fact, to it. And if you get a chance to share the website location,
yes, I'm going to share that.
Yeah, that would be, I think, would be really enormously helpful. And so this was a woodcut illustration with like this insane amount of detail about Venice in the year 1500. And you can see the folks who did this website were kind enough to create a series of layers. For example, they were calling out where all the bridges are. And so you can see where all the bridges are, where the churches are, right? And then even in some cases showing us where demolished churches are. So these are churches that existed in the year 1500, but no longer exist in Venice. And so it was a really great sort of like kind of time capsule screenshot, time shot, whatever you want to call it, of capture of like what Venice looked like in the year 1500, at least to one mind's eye. Now, obviously it is still a drawing, and so the question of did the artist get it entirely right is always a question. Do you miss something because the particular angle of the picture might mean that a building is obscuring some detail or element, right? It's not the same thing as a top-down satellite view of the city, but it sort of seemed like this was a great place to sort of like start from.
Exactly. I'm just gonna add. We know
Sure.
nowadays, of course, that this map is. I mean, it's not a map. It's a view from above, and it's of course not 100% accurate. We know now that it was distorted quite a lot, and that there are quite some buildings which have been made bigger or smaller, like for example the Doge's Palace and stuff like that. So of course this was not 100% realistic depiction of Venice, but for the year 1500, this was a great achievement, of course. And
right.
I mean, we're super excited to have found that.
Really remarkable, right? So so I'll share a different screen now, and so this is I use Affinity Photo as opposed to Photoshop, so it's pretty much the same program but slightly different. And this is the multi-layer map of Venice that I wound up creating. I did have a professional how can I phrase this? Professional trade secret, which was that I had a map of Venice from the year 1950, which I had thanks to a really rather excellent city book that I bought that happened to have a DVD containing hundreds of very detailed city maps.
Wow, super.
So I was luckily, rather than in some cases, for example, with the first book that we did together, which was set in Florence, I actually had to hand draw a map of Florence and from the approximate year 1492, right? which was very painstaking. Luckily, in this case, I had this map of Venice from 1950, which I could then, in effect, kind of carve away and cut away and then alter. In addition to the website that you had found, I found another website that had a speculative version of Venice from the 1950s, from around 1500. And so this gave me a kind of an idea of where at least some academics have tried to figure out like what constituted Venice in the year 1500. And that allowed me to start to begin to carve away at the map that I had from 1950 to start to shape, in effect, what the different districts of Venice would have looked like in the previous years, right? So what we wound up with was a set of individual sort of like layers. I basically carved out each district to give allowed for some isolation when I needed to. And we later have we have both this general map of Venice and then also maps of each individual district of Venice in some detail. And so I had to go in and carve away, first cutting the city of Venice down to the approximate size it would have been in 1500, because in effect islands are added by the Venetians over the centuries. And then also going in and having to carve away at, in some cases, what are then canals, which have then been filled in and are now streets. And so having to go in and figure out, okay, what's now a street that was once a canal, and then comparing that to the Barberi Map, to figure out where the bridges were. So we showed you that layer that had an idea of where all the bridges were in 1500. So then having to go in and then add bridges wherever the map sort of showed. And I think, so you could see from the Barberi map that like there are also enormous detail differences between what the buildings look like in 1500 versus what they look like in the 20th century or now in the 21st. So, for example, the Doge's Palace and the basilica there, the tower, those are pretty similar in some ways in structure to the current editions of the current versions of where everything sits. The sort of the plaza itself, the footprint to some extent hasn't changed. But if you look, you'll see that the modern version of the sort of the lower left-hand part of the plaza here is actually very different now. So if you look at what Venice looks like today, it doesn't look like this at all. So then what I had to do then was to go into this map and then actually kind of alter the buildings to make sure that they matched the sort of the 1500 era Venice. And in this case, that also included, if I remember correctly, like adding in, there's very clear from some of these that there's, for example, this very small, like sort of canal that seems to come underneath the set of buildings there that you can see in the Barberi map, which is missing from the current actual sort of like modern Venice.
Well, that's really, I didn't even know that you did so much detail work in such a place there. I mean, we talked about two very specific areas, and this was the Arsenal and the region around the Rialto with the market and everything, where I know that you had to change a lot, or where we had to figure out the access to the Arsenal, for example, because this was absolutely not clear. So.
Yeah. In fact, so the Arsenal, there are a lot of different versions of what the Arsenal may or may not have looked like over the course, and it seems to have changed a great deal in the 15th and 16th centuries. So depending on which picture you look of Venice, literally in a span of 20 years or so, it will have changed. But I hope that we got it close enough. See if I can pull up. So you can see the Arsenal as it's depicted in de Barberi's map is this kind of, there's a kind of appears to be an entrance on one side into what is an enclosed sort of bay or whatever you want to call it. And then there's the main historical entrance, which is actually from the south side and then comes up into a series of like kind of connected, I'm not sure what to call them, basins. And so I had to kind of cut away what was the modern Arsenal down to essentially that shape, right? So here's the entrance from the north side, and then here is the southern entrance that comes in into the Vecchia and then into the Nova, right?
And we still didn't know exactly how the Darsena Nova was connected to the Darsena Vecchia. We think that there is a canal beneath a building, like a big bridge or something like that.
But in fact, I think in the close-up of this district, we actually call out that. So right underneath where my cursor is, if hopefully people can see where my cursor is moving, like this building here is actually, from what we can tell, appears to be a covered waterway that passes between the Vecchia and the Nova, and so which we had to sort of like parse out from like a bunch of different clues in a couple of different sources, right? But in fact, actually, I'll see if I can show you that in the Barberi map. And unfortunately, this is not as high resolution as in the if you actually go to the website, you can see this better. But right here is this building here is essentially, as far as we can tell, is the covered waterway that passes between one and the other. And if I understand the way the Arsenal worked, the idea was they would build the ship in what we've called the Darsena Nova in this space, and then right, and then as it passed through that covered building, they would load it with gear. So the building was structured so that you could access the warehouses on both the north and south side of it. And so the galleys would be built here. They would pass through that building. And while they were in there, they would load all of the cannons and all the other things that they were putting onto the ship would be loaded in from the warehouses, and then it would exit into the Darsena Vecchia, where it was presumably as a fully finished galley, and then it could then sail out of the arsenal and into the lagoon. Presumably that, I don't know how long that lasted as the way that it was structured, because in a sense, if you look at later maps, it's very different. They greatly expand the northern sort of like basin and then connect the two basins together. So this becomes a very different map by the time you reach the sort of the even the 1700s. It's very different. So. And then the other area that we were talking about, I mean, there were a number of places where, in particular, luckily, the Barberi Map that we found online, they particularly the demolished churches was sort of very handy in telling us, where we have to go in and remove churches. But the other place was the Grand Market, which is called out more on the detail map. But so there's a whole market area here that we had to alter. Because the current building structures were only built in, I want to say it's the late 1500s, because there's a giant fire that runs through
late 1600s. Oh yeah, the fire was around I think 1514 or something like that, if I remember that right. And then a lot of buildings were destroyed there, and then in the from 1514 to 1550 or 60, a lot of new buildings were built there, and
so
up into the 1700s.
Right, we kind of wound up having to do a speculative idea, once again, based mostly on what de Barberi shows in his map, of what this area would have looked like, in effect, in the pre-fire / immediate fire moment. And so this is the building structures here are not what you would find in modern Venice, next to the bridge. And of course, the Ponte di Rialto itself is very different from the modern Ponte di Rialto. There's some fabulous pictures from that era of the actual wooden bridge that existed. The bridge.
And you did a wonderful illustration of that one. I wish we could show that one as well. Do you have it?
Well, actually, I mean, if you want to hang on a second, I can.
Yeah, because this would be really nice to show. Because it's very different from what people would expect the Rialto Bridge to look like. Yeah, here it is.
Right.
That's so wonderful.
So this was slightly speculative, at least in terms of the look of the market itself. So I tried to map what we had created on the map. But the market, once again, doesn't look like the modern market. But luckily, there are a lot of really, really great paintings from the late 1400s and early 1500s, which do depict what the bridge looked like at that time period. And so this depiction of the bridge is I would say, pretty accurate for its, it may not be 100% accurate, but it's pretty accurate for what the Rialto Bridge actually looked like in the year 1500. So obviously not the modern bridge, which is beautiful stone bridge. This was an older wooden bridge with, very interestingly, I think a sort of a drawbridge section in the middle that would allow ships to pass through it with their main masts
exactly.
Fully up. So a lot of unfortunately, there's a lot of speculation that kind of had to go into some of this. And then the final step was calling out some of the specific buildings that we wanted to highlight. And then there's more of those called out in the individual district maps, both in terms of locations that are hopefully important to people of Venice generally, but then also adventure locations that are actually being covered in the book.
Could you maybe show one of the detail maps, maybe the one with the arsenal in there?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Because that would be nice to see for everyone.
Yeah, sorry, pulling that one up quickly. If I can find it. So here is, this is actually, sorry, this is the one I found is a slightly lower resolution version. So this was the version of the arsenal that is in the detail map in effect. And then we also added San Michele and San Cristoforo, which now are one island, but in the year 1500 were actually two separate islands. And then calling out both the main area of the arsenal and then a series of, well, in some cases these are sort of plazas, but otherwise focusing, I think, mostly on churches, right, that are located.
Yeah, right now there are mostly churches in here.
Although I think the Secola, if I remember correctly, isn't that
Scuola di San Giorgio della Schiavoni? Yeah. So one of the scuole is called that as well.
Yeah. So and I think most of these are in most cases these were buildings that still exist today. So it didn't have to do too much to alter them. But in some cases there were churches that had been destroyed or disappeared that we had to add back in to the map, etc. So this is what the detail maps will look like, and giving you a little bit more sort of information than what's in the main map, which is in a sense is the whole of Venice, right? So.
Yeah, well, that's super great. I didn't even know that you had this map available on which you could build. Actually, I was wondering how you did this, and I thought it might be really interesting.
very yes. That's a professional trade secret, right? I was very lucky that I had that map, because otherwise doing this would have been much more difficult. So
I can imagine.
luckily there are, in a sense, what I had done with the Florence map was to find, there were some pretty good reconstruction maps for Florence that I had to basically hand copy and draw over, right, to sort of like actually create the physical map of Florence. In this case, I was able to luckily I had a digital solution that could short circuit that process and make it much easier. So the main part became, in a sense, kind of the editing the map to get it so that hopefully we've got the canals and the bridges where they would have been in the year 1500. I'm sure that I think there's something like, I think on the website map that they did where they call out the bridges, I want to say there's like 100 different bridges or more. There's a good chance that I missed one, right? So if as a GM, if you're running this and your players move down a street and suddenly you're like, it really feels like there should be a bridge there. there might be a few spots like that. But then also it's Venice being a city of canals, you were expected also to take boats from spot to spot, right? So you weren't necessarily moving around the city on foot. You're moving around the city both on foot and then in boats to get.
Okay, and actually, being a little bit confused in Venice is also part of the campaign. This is one of our themes that we are using actually, disorientation. So because I've been very often in Venice, and even nowadays with street maps and everything, you are all the time confused about where to go right now, because it always looks a little bit different, and so even today it's hard to really go from one place to another. Of course, with Google Maps and everything, it's become much easier, but Venice is disorienting, and it's part of the campaign. And if there is a bridge missing, even better, because people will be more confused. That's quite fine, actually.
Right. I think there's always a difference between, in effect, between cities that have been planned. So you have an urban planner who comes down and lays out the city grid, et cetera, versus cities that kind of grow organically. And Venice has always felt like one of those cities that has grown organically. And which is just, it can be very confusing, and there are dead ends, and there are things that maybe once made sense and they no longer make sense, right? So
exactly.
Although
we're still lucky somehow, because Venice, as it is today, still has a lot of the original buildings from the 1500s, from the 1400s even, or 16th, 17th. But of course, to create such a map, this incredible endeavor had to be a little bit of a guesswork or puzzling stuff together. But we do have now something that is already incredibly detailed, and that will help players a lot, I guess. I mean, I'm looking forward to people actually playing with this map, and we're going to have it in high resolution and printed out also for the crowdfunding, so it's going to look incredible. Yep.
Yeah, I hope that you know, it's if nothing else, it can. I always think that like a good map, it should hopefully just be useful on its own, right? Just as
Yes.
this kind of as a piece of art or whatever you want to call it. So hopefully hopefully people will get good use out of it, both in the campaign and then elsewhere maybe. So
yeah, of course. I mean, we loved it a lot. I would actually hang one of these just on my wall because I love them so much. So.
okay, yeah, it's yeah. I think, I mean, yeah, good gaming poster maps are great additions to any wall, I think.
Okay, exactly. So, thank you very much, Mark. I
Sure.
guess we're gonna have a lot for our backers to show for the people who are interested in our work. I'm just gonna stop the recording again. Bye bye to everyone who's watching now. Stop the recording.